Wouldn't you agree that Avram Avinu is the epitome of serving Hashem out of absolute dedication without personal interest? And yet, the Torah seems to imply that he was concerned about reward. What does that tell us about serving Hashem lishma? Even pasuk altira Avram anochi mogen lach scharcha harba me'od. The pasuk says that David tells Avram Avinu, "Do not fear; your reward is very great." What does that mean? Is Rashi before Rashi explains. As Avram Avinu was worried that Baal, as seeing as he had a tremendous miracle where he was able to vanquish these very powerful kings when he went to rescue Lot. So he was worried, maybe I've already received all the reward for my righteousness. So David reassures him, don't worry. The fact that you're worried about getting your reward, don't worry. Your reward is very great. It really does not seem to make sense. Avram Avinu's mode of serving the Eibishter wasn't for his own sake in order to get reward. He served the Eibishter out of dedication to the Eibishter. As the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, when the Rambam describes the greatness of a person who serves Hashem out of love, which is that means that's somebody who is engaged in Torah mitzvahs, not for any personal interest, but not in order to inherit goodness, but rather it's a person who does what is true because it is true. It says the Rambam, that is a tremendously advanced level, and then he tells us that is the characteristic of Avram Avinu, that he only served the Eibishter out of love. In other words, he had no interest in reward. How can we suggest, as Rashi appears to do, as Avram that Avram Avinu serves the Eibishter only out of love for the Eibishter? He was worried about possible lack of reward that he personally would get. To the extent that the Eibishter had to reassure him, don't worry because you have a great reward. How? So, perhaps you could suggest the following answer. Of course, Avram Avinu's avodah was for the sake of heaven. And he didn't think about what he's going to get out of it. He didn't even worry about his reward in the next world. But if Avram Avinu gets to realize that he has no reward, it's not that he's worried about the reward, he's worried about what that would say about his avodah. Maybe there'd be an illustration that his avodah is lacking and that's why his reward is lacking. And maybe that's Avram Avinu's concern rather than the concern about the actual reward itself. That would fit beautifully with the language the Rambam uses. As an Eved mi ahava, that somebody who serves the Eibishter out of love does that which is true because it is true. But then the Rambam adds, and as a result of that, good things will come to him, which almost implies that that's an indicator that he's done what the Eibishter wants. In other words, the Rambam's not only telling us don't worry, the person who serves Hashem lishma is also going to be rewarded, even though that's not his intention. Why would we need that information? And why does the Rambam say that the goodness will come because of the work that a person had done? So perhaps what he's telling us is, what is the indication that somebody who truly serves Hashem out of love and dedication is the fact that good things come to them afterwards. For which reason, if a person sees that they are getting reward in this world, when Avram Avinu sees that he's gotten his reward in this world because he's vanquished all of these kings, so maybe then what the Rambam says, that the ultimate goodness which will come at the end as a result of a person's avodah, maybe Avram Avinu was not going to get that anymore. So it's not that Avram Avinu is worried about the schar, but Avram Avinu could possibly be seeing that as an indicator that his avodah Hashem is lacking. Okay, sounds like a great explanation, it just doesn't fit with the words. And in fact, it's a real stretch to suggest that that's what the pasuk or Rashi are trying to tell us. Because if Avram Avinu was not worried about missing out on reward, but he was only concerned that the lack of reward would indicate a lack of service of the Eibishter. Then the Eibishter's words of of reassurance should have addressed the primary issue. The Eibishter should have said, don't worry, your avodah is perfect. But he doesn't. He says, don't worry, your reward is great. That's not addressing the issue that we're trying to claim Avraham Avinu is concerned about. The fun was the pasuk zogt. The fact that the pasuk uses these words, ulterior, don't worry, Avraham Avinu, your reward is great. Not one word about how great your avodah is mochachas die inyan aschar do is nicht als a simen auf andere Sach, na als a inyan far sich. That implies that the real issue on the table over here is, are you getting reward or not? Not what that tells you about your avodah. In which case, we're back to square one. Why would that bother Avraham Avinu at all? He's not in this for the reward. So in order to understand this, we're going to look at a very intriguing story quoted in the Zohar on this week's parsha. It's a strange story in Zohar Parsha Seinu, in the Zohar on our parsha, on this exact theme about the great reward that Hashem promises Avraham Avinu. So the Zohar is dot before. Firstly, the Zohar explains as that a person who is engaged in Torah learning is given long life in the next world, and wealth and reward in this world. That's the framing principle, and then it tells the story. Rabbi Abba once made a public announcement that any person who wants to have wealth in this world and length of days in the next world should come along and learn Torah. So people came. One of them is one bachelor came along and he said, I want to learn Torah. Why do I want to learn Torah? Because I want to have the wealth that you just promised. And Rabbi Abba was fine with that. Rabbi Abba had he welcomed him in. Rabbi Abba had him gefragt via haste. And Rabbi Abba asked him, who are you? What's your name? He said, my name is Yossi. So Rabbi Abba turned to his students and says, this is how we're going to refer to this Yossi. Call him Rabbi Yossi, who is the master of wealth and of honor. Okay, all's good, he's learning. A period of time goes by. As Rabbi Yossi comes to Rabbi Abba and gefrekt. So Rabbi Yossi comes to Rabbi Abba and he says, Anu Yisra, where's the Ashiris? Where's the wealth? You told us whoever learns Torah is going to be wealthy. Where's the wealth? Rabbi Abba was not impressed, and he said, It appears that Rabbi Yossi did not commit himself to studying Torah for the sake of heaven. And then, basically, he had a very harsh attitude towards Rabbi Yossi. And he actually wanted to daven that Rabbi Yossi should pass away because he was learning Torah with the wrong intentions. But he didn't. Why not? Because he heard a baskel. So a baskel announced, don't punish Rabbi Yossi because he will eventually become a great man. So, after Rabbi Abba gesagt to Rabbi Yossi, so then Rabbi Abba said to Rabbi Yossi, you carry on learning and I'll take care of the finances. I'll make sure that you become wealthy. And then the Zohar tells us what he did, or what happened shortly after that assisted him. On the Zohar that told weiter, as it's Rabbi Abba is gekommen and Osher, shortly after that a wealthy man came to Rabbi Abba. Somebody who was not in a position to learn Torah for whatever reason, not in gebeten, and he said, please could you find one of your students to learn on my behalf, and I'll bankroll him and make him a wealthy man. Perfect shidduch. Rabbi Abba gesagt Rabbi Yossi, soll lernen Torah und Osher wird ihm geben Neusher. So Rabbi Abba says to Rabbi Yossi, you wanted wealth, here you go. You learn Torah on behalf of this man and he'll give you wealth. And immediately, the first installment that he got was, Yoav le'ahu kasa de paz, gegeben Rabbi Yossi a case von Gingold. So immediately, the wealthy guy gave Rabbi Yossi this fine gold goblet. Rabbi Yossi sat and he learned Torah in depth on this person's behalf. And the person would send him wealth on a regular basis. Now the penny drops for Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi reaches a point where he values Torah for its own value. And therefore, so he was upset and he cried over the fact that he had surrendered the value of Torah in favor of physical wealth. As Rabbi Abba does get so Rabbi Abba heard that. He said, now we can clarify that Rabbi Yossi actually learned for the sake of heaven. he called the wealthy man, take your wealth back, give it to the orphans and to the poor, and give us up to I'll give you a great portion in Torah. And then Rabbi Yossi who kasset the paz, Rabbi Yossi hat him umgekehrt dem kost the paz. And then after that, Rabbi Yossi returned the golden goblet back to the wealthy man. Va'ad yoimelo ad shmei ben pazi, and up until today he is known as and bizdem tog vet from Rabbi Yossi ben Pazi. That's the name that he was given, ben Pazi. So even kasset the paz, remembering that fine gold goblet that he was given. Now this is a very unusual story with many questions and a few nuances. Let's first look at the questions. In them super to me, there are three key issues about the story that really don't seem to make sense. So maybe some of the issues, the three that we're going to identify. Number one, Aleph. Why was Rabbi Abba willing and ready to punish Rabbi Yossi for learning Torah Shalai Lishma? We know that many of us learn Torah Shalai Lishma. In fact, it's endorsed by the Gemara. It says, we're always told that a person should engage in Torah mitzvahs even if it's not for the right intentions, because eventually you'll come to have the right reasons. So why does Rabbi Abba want to punish him? And the Timia is noch aggressor. What makes it even stranger is Rabbi Abba was the one who set him up in the first place. Rabbi Abba is given man the boy oisra. Rabbi Abba is the one who said, a person who wants to be wealthy, come and learn Torah. Now he's getting angry that he wanted the wealth. And Rabbi Yossi was clear with his intentions right from the start. He said, I'm coming to learn so that I should become wealthy. To the extent that Rabbi Abba actually said to the other students, call him, the person who's here, as the one with wealth and honor. So what changed in Rabbi Abba's mind after Rabbi Yossi asked where the wealth is? That he was so upset at him that he wanted to punish him, and even with the worst possible punishment, something doesn't add up in the story. Number two, base. Von dem was nicht noch hat Rabbi Abba gesagt, lahu gavras mekan la bozol Rabbi Yossi ufheren geben asheres vale verlenen Torah lishmo. So now, what happens? At the point where Rabbi Yossi comes to his senses, so to speak, and recognizes the value of Torah, so Rabbi Abba says to the wealthy man, stop supporting him. But not only that, now Rabbi Yossi had umgekehrt dem kasset de paz. What happens? Rabbi Yossi goes back and gives the kasset de paz back. He gives back the golden goblet. Which was the deposit, so to speak, on the contract that they had made between them. That implies, is mashma, as they meet to give it sounds like Rabbi Yossi wants to undo the entire deal that he had with a wealthy man, which is who knows how many weeks, months, or even years later. And he wants to retract the value and merit of the Torah that this rich man had already gotten in the past from Rabbi Yossi's learning. Is Tomur. That's really strange. The value and merit of the Torah that Rabbi Yossi had previously learned already belongs to the wealthy man. Who does Rabbi Yossi think, or how does Rabbi Yossi think that he's going to take that back? And lastly, Gimel, and then the end of the story, when Rabbi Yossi regrets having been motivated for money and recognizes the value of Torah, what do they call him? So if they're going to give him a name after the fact that he realized the value of Torah and dedicated himself to Torah, you'd expect the name to be something that lauds him. But now they call him Ben Pazi, which is an eternal reminder of the fact that his original motivation was the golden goblet and the wealth that was supposed to come with it. And usually we're not supposed to remind a Baal Tshuva about the issues of their past. So what's happening over here? Why is Rabbi Abba upset that he wants money when he told him to come for money? How does Rabbi Yossi expect he's going to get the reward back retroactively for what he learned on behalf of the wealthy man? Why do we name him Rabbi Yossi ben Pazi? To always remind us of his misguided origins. In addition to which, there are a few details, nuances in the story that we have to examine. We're going to again look at just a few of them. Number one, Aleph, the Baskel, as Gavar Rabbi Have, the Baskel that told Rabbi Abba, don't punish Rabbi Yossi because he will become a great man. So why is that a reason not to punish him? Whichever way you look at it, the logic doesn't work. If learning Torah for the wrong reasons or for a misguided reason is forbidden and deserves punishment, so what does it help? Then in the future he's going to emerge as a great person. Okay, but right now he's doing something which is forbidden and deserves punishment. On the other hand, so first the question, and then sort of the matter davar also. So because in the future he's going to turn out a good guy, now we're going to allow him to do something which is forbidden? And on the other hand, and if there is no problem with learning something for the wrong reasons, because that's how we all start out and eventually we'll come to Lishma, so darf doch nicht ankunst haben für Rabbi haben. Then I don't need to know that in the future he's going to be a great man, because every person is permitted to learn Torah for the wrong reasons, because from that we'll come to the right reasons. So why is this relevant to the story, that he'll be a great man at some point in time? And second of all, a detail in the story that seems completely irrelevant is his marital status. Why is it important for us to know that Rabbi Yossi was a bachelor when he came to Rabbi Abba for the first time? So we'll try and explain it. Let's try and explain it, because the Chazal are very clear about what it means to study Shaloi Lishma. The whole reason why we give allowance for a person to study Torah and to do mitzvahs with the wrong intentions is because eventually it will bring you to the right reasons. In other words, it's not just because we look, as long as you're doing the right thing, we don't really care about your intentions. And therefore, if you're doing the right things, it overwhelms the fact that perhaps you're doing them with the wrong motivation. As the ulterior says in Hilchos Talmud Torah, the mitzvah is being done in the correct format, but your mind is somewhere else. Your mind is misguided. No, that's not the message. The whole motivation to allow somebody to learn Torah or do mitzvahs for the wrong reasons is because we believe that they will mature and graduate to doing it for the right reasons, and that's the reason. So maybe that's what was bothering Rabbi Abba, because now Rabbi Yossi is like banging on the table saying, where's this wealth that you promised me? And he's quite adamant about it. So maybe what bothered Rabbi Abba is if somebody is so invested in the wrong intentions, with such strength and commitment, maybe he'll never get to learn Lishma. Maybe that's why Rabbi Abba was so upset about the story. But it's not a good enough explanation. Let's assume that somebody who is so self-interested and therefore they are completely stuck in the Lo Lishma. Maybe the rule is I shouldn't be learning Torah with that person. Fine, accept it. But where is the logic to say and punish that person for having that kind of misguided attitude, and even not just punish them, but with the worst possible punishment? There's got to be more to the story over here. Therefore, in order to understand this, we have to appreciate that when we speak about learning Sheloi Lishma, that could happen in two different ways, and they are very different approaches. In the meaning von learning Torah when a person is learning Torah with the intention of receiving reward, there are two completely different attitudes they could take. Aleph, could be that a person says, I trust that the Eibishter has rewards for learning Torah, and I trust that the Eibishter will give those rewards. So that's why I'm going to learn Torah in order to receive those rewards. As the Alter Rebbe calls it, the person is learning in order to receive something in the world to come. Or or even in this world, to get wealth and to get kavod, as the pasuk says, so those people who are masmilim, who are maybe a little bit more self-interested in their Torah learning, they're going to get wealth in this world. But it's although the interest is what I'm going to get, it's clear that what I'm getting from the Eibishter, because that's the system that the Eibishter made. So maybe it's not the most pure form of learning Torah, but at least I acknowledge that it's coming from the Eibishter. But then there's another attitude that a person can take, where a person learns Torah, where the person is learning Torah in order to get things from other people, that the people should give me honor, that the people should call me the Rosh Yeshiva, or that the people should pay me a good salary because I'm the person who is qualified to teach, or to be the dayan, or to be the rabbi of the community. That's different to saying, I trust that the Eibishter will give a reward. This is a person who's looking to find a way to take things for themselves because of their learning. That's a much lower form of Lo Lishma. And the mofen is not a cheson from Shaloi Lishma v'ener shenofen. So here, the problem is not just that the person is not as pure in their intentions as they should be. Not asech de iser. But here they're transgressing a rule about Torah, which is Al ta'aseha Torah is gadol, that you're not allowed to make the Torah into your crown for your greatness, or your spade in order to dig and earn a living. It says no, it's just that if you have a person that's not yet at the level of advanced fear of the Eibishter, to speak words of Torah only lishma, and it is gadol oili hisparnas, and the intention is to get some kind of accolade or in order to get money. So then we say, okay, you know what? Well, rather, at least you should be learning Torah, even if it's for the wrong reasons. Rather than doing absolutely nothing and having no engagement with Torah, because we know that the Torah will eventually seep through and the person will come to learn Torah for the right reasons. But what's key over here is to understand that there is an imperfect intention around Torah, where the person wants the Eibishter to reward them, and there is a malevolent intention around Torah, which is I'm going to use the Torah as a means to get the things that I want out of other people. With this insight, we can understand something specific that the Alter Rebbe says in his Shulchan Aruch, where he lists various ways in which a person could learn Torah with the wrong intentions. So he says, he describes the intention where a person wants a reward, whether it's in the next world or whether it's wealth and honor in this world, from the Eibishter, that the Eibishter should facilitate. And then when he speaks about the possibility that a person is going to look for ways to bring goodness to themselves from the community, there he only speaks about being given accolades, being called the head of the community, etc. And he doesn't speak over there about wealth. Why does the Alter Rebbe make that distinction? Well, we can understand based on seeing the two different kinds of sheloi lishma. That if a person needs a means of income, we allow them to use Torah in order to service themselves. He says, because a person does have a responsibility, al pi Torah, to look after their family, and if they need an income stream, and that's where it's going to come from, that's valid. But when a person wants to get more than what they need, they want to become wealthy from the Torah. Boyfriend has mentions of the Miraich machen der Far Vasel and Torah, where he wants people to enrich him because he's learning Torah. If them is nitod the heteranal, there actually is no leniency. We'll allow a person to take a role as a teacher or as a dayan or as a rabbi in order to have a parnasa, but to become a millionaire through learning Torah, that has no space within halacha. Now, this distinction between the two kinds of lishma, we can understand Rabbi Abba's attitude towards Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Abba's achroza, man boy oyser chuli yosef shtad by raisa. When Rabbi Abba made an advert that anybody who wants to become wealthy, come learn Torah, at gemeint the Moshe was is nit min hashamayim. What he meant is that the Eibishter will give you wealth. You learn Torah, and even though that's not the best motivation to learn Torah, but the reality is that mitoch shaloi lishma bal lishma, eventually you'll come around. In the meantime, you believe that the Eibishter will give you wealth, and that's acceptable. On hat gerechnet, as Ashiris hat Rabbi Yossi gehabt in Sinnen, wenn hat gesagt, boine le mele bei Reise gedei shiele oyser. And when Rabbi Yossi applies for the position, he says, I'd like to learn Torah in order to get Ashiris. In Rabbi Abba's mind, they're on the same page. Oh, what you mean is you're going to learn Torah, the Eibishter will provide you with the wealth that he's supposed to provide for you. But then Rabbi Yossi illustrates that that's not his intention. But when Rabbi Abba gets this knock on the door from Rabbi Yossi to say, where's the wealth? That now clarifies that right from the start, Rabbi Yossi's attitude was, I'm going to learn Torah, you, Rabbi Abba, are going to make me wealthy, or find a way to make me wealthy. Therefore, so for that, Rabbi Abba wanted to punish him, because you're not allowed to use Torah in order to become wealthy. It's not just that he is learning without pure intentions. No, but he's looking to use the crown of Torah in order to enrich himself. Well, there clearly we say that somebody who takes that attitude to use the Torah for their own personal gain deserves to be uprooted from the world, and therefore he deserves this punishment. And that's why the Zohar tells us in the story that he was a bachelor. If Rabbi Yossi had the responsibilities of a family, we could defend him and say, then he would have the requirement for wealth in order to provide for his wife and children everything that is mandated by the Torah. Which is something that the Torah does allow. But the fact that he was a bachelor and had no major overheads, This is a that tells you that what is Rabbi Yossi's interest? He wants wealth for himself. And if there is in Token Heter Kanal, and there is no Heter in Torah to use the Torah in order to personally enrich yourself. And therefore, Rabbi Abba had to completely reject this approach to learning Torah and this self-interest, and to the extent that he wanted Chas V'Shalom to punish him. But then that only raises the question further: why does the Baskel tell Rabbi Abba that don't worry, Rabbi Yossi is going to be a great man in the future? So in the future he's going to be a great man. So now we're going to permit him to continue a path of learning Torah where he just wants to enrich himself and make himself wealthy, which you're not supposed to do. Well, here's the thing: we have to understand what mitoich sheloi lishma actually means, and understand who Rabbi Yossi was, even though it wasn't yet apparent. We know that the interpretation is, out of learning Torah with the wrong intentions, you'll come to learn Torah with the right intentions. That doesn't just mean down the line. It doesn't just mean if you learn Torah now for the wrong reasons, eventually at some point in the future you'll learn Torah for the right reasons. Rather, what we're saying is embedded, buried inside the misguided intention, deeper down, there is the right intention. The teich von dem lishma is lishma. Even when a person is chasing Torah for what appears to be misguided reasons, actually what's driving them to learn Torah is a very holy and pure motivation. Why is that? Because at the essence, every single Jewish person is aligned with what the Eibishter wants. In dem Teich von jeder Eden is was für Matze soll no sein. The depth of a Jewish person, no matter their personal circumstances, is von der Ratzen Mekavonot zu Mekayim sein, dem Eibishter's Ratzen. At the core of our being, we want to do what the Eibishter wants. We know this very well from a famous psak of the Rambam. Ke psak din Rambam hayadua. Was best and Muslim kaifa sein to mekayim sein psak din Torah to give and I get. If you have a Jew who the Beis Din has to force to align himself with what the Torah requires, which is that he gives his wife a get. The Rambam says clearly that Jew wants to do what the Eibishter wants at this particular point in time. It's just that the Yetzer Hara got the better of them. That's why it helps for us to apply pressure, even physical pressure, to this person in order to get him to give the get. Despite the fact that a get has to be given willingly, and it does not feel very willing if the person is being forced. Because the Rambam tells us the external pressure helps reveal the fact that deep down this Jew wants to do whatever the Eibishter wants, and so it is with every single Jewish person, even the one who is learning Torah sheloi lishma, deep down is doing it lishma. Now, the reality is we don't always do this. We don't always look at a person and try and examine what's going on deep down inside of them. Sometimes we have to make a decision. Like the Tosfos makes a very clear distinction. Let's say somebody is motivated to learn Torah because they want honor from the community. We say, okay, deep down within that, you really want to do what the Eibishter wants. But Tosfos says, if a person is motivated to learn Torah in order to be able to tease or anger other people, by showing them up or by arguing with them, then such a person is better if they had never been created. Even though deep down we know that the neshama is aligned with what the Eibishter wants, but when you're using Torah in a toxic way, at that point in time you can no longer consider the deep down. You've got to say this is not on. Which doesn't seem initially to be so clear. Obviously, we understand that a person learning Torah in order to create discomfort for other people is obviously much worse than the person learning Torah because they want to attract covet for themselves. But surely it's just a misguided intention. In other words, it's not as bad as, let's say, somebody who learns and doesn't put any of it into practice. There are even opinions who say such a person should never learn Torah because the whole purpose of Torah is to apply it, and if you never apply it, why bother? Because there, it's not just that the intention is misguided, the Torah learning is not true Torah learning. Because the Gemara Brachos tells us that the ultimate objective of Torah learning is that it should translate into tshuva and good deeds. And therefore, if a person is learning Torah in a purely hypothetical way and does not want to translate it into action, that's not only that the person has the wrong intention in their learning, the whole learning doesn't exist. But here, how could it be, though, that if a person has an intention, yes, agreed, it's a toxic intention. He just wants to cause distress to other Jews by his learning of Torah. But that should completely disqualify not only his learning of Torah, but his own rights to exist. The explanation is this. This principle, that deep down within the Lo Lishma is a Lishma, is not as in dem Teich Funa Eden is Franti Kavona Lishma. That doesn't just mean deep down in the Jew's soul, the Jew wants to do what Hashem wants, which is obviously true, but it's beyond that. Now, as the Teich Fun de Shelo Lishma Gufo is Lishma, but rather what we're saying is the actual misguided intention has behind it a healthy intention. In other words, let's say that there's a person who is motivated because I'm going to get rewarded for learning Torah, because Torah mitzvahs bring reward. Whether that's side of Gashman, side of Ruchni, whether it's material or spiritual benefit. And it's not just some kind of random association that the Eibishter says, do this and then I'll reward you. But sometimes the reward is a natural consequence of the choices that we've made. Like the fact that a person will be honored and respected by society because they've learned Torah, that's a natural consequence. So the fact that the person is interested in that reward is not a blatant rejection of the fact that they want to serve the Eibishter. In fact, if you're dealing with somebody who is completely dedicated to doing what the Eibishter wants, then even the facet of that relationship where they're going to get something out of it, the receiving of that reward is also what the Eibishter wants. What does that mean? From the Emes von Lishma badait, as beim Lernen und Kima Mitzvah tachmen in ganzen nicht wegen sich, aber wegen dem eigenen Te'eles, because the ultimate serving the Eibishter Lishma is I don't think about myself and I don't think about my interests. Now, but I'm doing this completely because that's what the Eibishter wants. So somebody who is truly committed to Hashem, the reward that they're getting the reward for the Eibishter's sake, not for their own sake. In other words, when that person becomes wealthy or honored, as an example, the person not walking around now strutting their stuff saying, look at me, look what I achieved, and I deserve this, and it's really coming to me. Rather, the person is saying, you know what, I am now increasing the Eibishter's honor in our world. Because now I'm clear evidence to the world that if you do what the Eibishter wants, life will be better for you. So why do I want the reward? So that other people will be attracted to doing what the Eibishter wants, not because I need the reward. Like the pasuk says, that the Eibishter tells Avram, I'm going to make your name great. So doing them decided, Al-Sheikh asks the question, Hat then Avram gesucht Gadlus? Avram was looking for fame. Es doch gefem bottom in Metzias. Avram Avinu was completely neutralized in the story. He saw himself as nothing but dust and ashes. Chassidus explains that that's exactly why Agad Lashmecha. If anybody should have their name amplified, it should be somebody who's so dedicated to the Eibishter. Verbald, as Avram is given bottle by Metzias, because Avram Avinu completely disappears in the story. And therefore, all of this fame, etc., means absolutely nothing to him, as his own self means nothing to him. So therefore, the great name of Avram Avinu is not the name of a human being, an individual called Avram Avinu. It's the name of the Eibishter who made Avram Avinu. The fact that the Eibishter is now advertised through the world, because look at the great Avram Avinu who is dedicated to the Eibishter, that's great. It's not for me, it's for the Eibishter. And so therefore, deep down, within the motivation to have reward, lies the motivation, because that reward will be a Kiddush Hashem. That's what we mean when we say mitoich shelo lishma. As the teich von lo lishma gufa is lishma, that embedded in the so-called misguided intention is a beautiful intention. Das was dir fehlt as ihm will sich kovet vashus v'kayotze baze. Here you have a Jew who in his consciousness is interested in his wealth and his respect. Is das not mitzad guf? That consciousness is only because of the physicality of the human being. But there's something deeper, which is also part of the human being. There's the interest and the motivation of the neshama. The neshama would prefer that there's wealth and there's honor, so that Torah is uplifted in the world. Because the neshama wants to be a walking advert that if you do what the Eibishter wants, life will be good for you, and therefore you should do what the Eibishter wants. This is similar to the Baal Shem Tov's explanation of the pasuk that those who are hungry and thirsty, the neshama is wrapped up in that desire. As the hunger endures from them guf, the fact that the human body feels the attraction to either eat something or drink something, that's driven by the fact that the neshama wants access to that food or that drink. The nefesh will mavor sein, and it's a kedusha from the Michael or Mashke, because the neshama identifies that there are potential holy sparks in that food or drink that it wants to access, and the way to access is stimulate hunger and thirst in the human body, so we'll go there. Likewise over here, the neshama wants to advertise the Eibishter's greatness in the world, so what does it do? It stimulates the human consciousness to say, I want to be wealthy, I want to have greatness. On der Fall ist dienen von miteich shloilish ma balish ma shaykh dafke, wenn es redt sich wegen as apnea, was teich ken sein nicht mal. So therefore, under what circumstances can a misguided intention actually have the depth of something positive if the misguided intention is not contrary to the goal of what the deeper intention is? Mashenke devos lent the kanter, whereas if a person is learning Torah only to be able to ziddle somebody else, that's the exact opposite of advertising the Eibishter in the world or making a Kiddush Hashem. It has no upside. There's no way that you could argue that embedded deep within that misguided motivation is actually a healthy motivation. That's impossible. And now we can appreciate why it was so important for the Baskel to tell Rabbi Abba that Rabbi Yossi is somebody you should allow to learn Torah, even for the pursuit of wealth, because he will be a great person, not just a person, a great person. Even though, generally speaking, you're not allowed to use Torah for personal and certainly financial gain. The het is not ispanis unless it's just simply to put bread on the table. But if somebody is a person of the caliber that the entire community needs them, then if there's nobody of his caliber in the community, then the community is required not just to make sure that he has bread and butter, but that he has a dignified income. In fact, they have a requirement to make him wealthy. Like the Kohen Gadol, it has to be, all the other Kohanim have to collaborate in order to raise his fiscal status. That applies to any spiritual leader. So therefore, the Baskel of Megalig when Asdosas Rabbi Yossi had gewollt haben Ashiras Aschar for sein Lernen. The Baskel is revealing to Rabbi Abba, you know why Rabbi Yossi is so driven to get wealth out of his Torah learning? Is das verbunden mit damit, was behebe die Kreches, was werden kommen Befehl und Gaver Rabbi lehave. That's because he has tremendous potential that is going to emerge, at which point he'll become the ultimate spiritual leader of his time. In which case, the community will have a responsibility not just to look after him, but to make him wealthy. Yes, right now, Rabbi Yossi hasn't yet revealed that internal strength, and he's still self-interested and he wants the wealth for himself. But you know what's driving that? A deeper part of Rabbi Yossi that is at this point still subconscious, because his neshama is motivating him to learn with the carrot of wealth, so that he'll be able to reveal his true greatness, at which point the community is required to make him wealthy. Now, the far is in them fall, in which case Rabbi Yossi, in his current status, is actually allowed to learn Torah even for the sake of personal wealth. Because right now he has this tremendous potential that is going to turn him into the greatest spiritual giant of his time. Damit wird man verstehen, was Rabbi Yossi hat zum Sof abgegeben zurück dem Kasse der Paz, which explains also why Rabbi Yossi eventually gives back the golden goblet. Und nach der Tam, was man hat ihm gerufen, Rabbi Yossi ben Pazi, and why he kept the name Rabbi Yossi ben Pazi, which initially we thought was an embarrassment. Because das, was the Tzibur darf man fahren, sein reich machen dem Godel Adoris can move on. The fact that the community has a responsibility to take the greatest spiritual leader and wealth and make him wealthy, Obviously, that cannot be something that's going to cause him personal pride and arrogance. Adrabah. The truth is, because this is a truly spiritual giant, who is completely nullified to the Eibishter. That's why he's the person who could actually handle wealth in an appropriate way and elevate it into something of service to the Eibishter. Because his wealth is not his wealth is to advertise the Eibishter's greatness in the world. And das is das bar in dem Sipur Amor, which helps us to understand that story in the Zohar. When Rabbi Yossi gives back the golden goblet, he doesn't chas v'shalom want to renege on the deal that he made with a wealthy man and say, you no longer get the value of the Torah that I learned. Because that's impossible. You can't undo what has been done. Now, Rabbi Yossi had gewollt herausbringen, wie viel zu die Tage von Esek HaTorah Lishmo darf sein. Rather, Rabbi Yossi wants to advertise how extreme dedication to learning Torah for its sake has to be. That even if you got something in the past that was a benefit from the Torah, you relinquish it because you really want to be committed to the Torah for its sake. On the Rebrat Minim Grufen Ben Pazi, the nomen is Lemal Yosef. That's why they called him Ben Pazi, because that was actually an accolade for him. Der Nomen bringt heraus Neusef al Shemaske Shlachar Shenasa Paz Pazi Echziroi. First of all, it says Pazi, that the gold became his. He already had it. He could have held on to it, and he chose to give it away. That illustrates his dedication to Torah Lishma. Adim Ma'ilek Deda from Rabbi Yosef says a Gavra Rabba, but most importantly, that illustrates to us that he was not just an ordinary person, a Gibor, but a Gavra Rabba. In other words, Gavra Afal Piva Shmoim Loshin Gibor. So even a person who is a Gavra, somebody who has the power to overcome negative impulses, etc., is nit bekaychet zufton as Paz Ashiris. The Shem Ashiris zon nisabech nisale ben to lishma. Not every person is able to take wealth and spin it around that it should be completely lishma. Even if they're a Gavra, even if they have a lot of self-control and focus. Rabbi Yossi a Gavra Rabba, but Rabbi Yossi, who as the Baskel shows us, was a great human being. That's somebody who could have the title, in other words, the mastery of the gold, like Ben Chorin, the person now has the title of freedom. He could completely control and completely own the gold, even the most expensive gold. And it becomes part of his spiritual journey. It is no longer ballast. It's no longer something that drags him down into the materialistic world. To the contrary, he's able to turn it into his journey of absolute dedication to the Eibishter, what we call Lishma. Now we can understand why the Eibishter tells Avram Avinu, don't worry, your reward will be great. Even though Avram Avinu serves the Eibishter out of dedication and love. That's exactly why his reward is actually important. Because Avram Avinu is the epitome of serving the Eibishter out of dedication and love. Well, then there's no question that whatever reward is coming to him through this avodah is not for him, it's for the Eibishter. Specifically when the Eibishter tells him that he's going to have tremendous reward, that is going to illustrate how great Avram Avinu's dedication to the Eibishter is. That Avram Avinu is so absent in his own self-assessment, in other words, he doesn't exist in his own self-assessment, that Avram Avinu is able to have the greatest, most tremendous reward, and it does not in any way interfere with his complete dedication to the Eibishter. To the contrary, that becomes part and parcel of how he serves the Eibishter. Because the greatness and the schar that he gets is not personal. The Gedula von Eibishter, it is all purely the Eibishter's greatness that he brings into the world, and therefore it's important for Avram Avinu to know that there's great reward, so that there could be great advert of the Eibishter into the world, so that others will be attracted to serve the Eibishter, and his intention is purely Lishma.